It is the last week of July, and that means that college sports are absolutely back on our radar. Today on Locked On Women's Basketball, we're going to talk all things NIL, ACC, and everything on campuses, plus so much more.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, friends. It is July 28th, 2025. Get ready to turn those calendars, everyone, because August is here. I hope you are surviving the heat waves as they come your way and enjoy these last few weeks before school is back in session all across the country. Hello, everybody. Missy Heidrich, national correspondent. Thank you for joining us here and making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, while the action is heating up on the court in the WNBA to end this month of July, we're also watching all of the happenings off the floor with college athletics ramping up to full speed. Fall sports are reporting to campuses for fall camp. Quotes and clips from media days are filling our news feeds. And we could not go a full summer cycle without someone uttering the term conference realignment. So here with me today to talk about all things ACC headlines in the women's basketball world, a man fresh off ACC football media days and the Bill Belichick show. And I know the one person that we can ask who was the best dressed ACC football coach this year. It's sports reporter at SB Nation and so much more, our friend Mitchell Northam. Good morning, Mitchell. Welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. Before we dive into all things that have happened in Charlotte last week, what lies ahead for the ACC, and so much more, some big storylines out of this weekend in the WNBA. I feel like I'm looking at a consistent MASH injury report because that seems to be what we're dealing with. It's been a rash of injuries, a rash of star players that are not on the floor. Breanna Stewart with a right leg injury, avoided significant injury, as Soze say. Her return is to be determined. Caitlin Clark still out. They are monitoring her, still to be determined. The Valkyries have had setbacks with a season-ending injury to Kayla Thornton. Just your thoughts as you look at this WNBA season and the fact that there's been some stars that have not been on the floor in recent days.
Yeah, I mean, for the Liberty, Emma Mieseman can't get here fast enough, right? If Breanna Stewart's going to be out for a significant amount of time. On the Fever, and I mean, we know that this team is a different team when Caitlin Clark is in the lineup. I feel like when she's not in the lineup, they really struggle to beat good teams. And they're still just kind of hovering around 500. They're 14-12. They got a game coming up against the Mercury. We'll see if she plays. But it's been a bit of a bummer to see. It's hard to call it a sophomore slump because it's not like, when she plays, she's been playing pretty well. Right. She just hasn't been playing all that consistently. She hasn't been on the floor as much as we would like to see. So that's been a bit of a bummer. Injuries have kind of, I feel like, put a damper on this part of the season. The good news is, I guess we're getting Cameron Brink back pretty soon.
Yes, and that was going to be something. She has been cleared, or so it's been announced. She has made that statement that she has been cleared. It's been close to 13 months since she suffered that ACL injury last summer. My question to you is, can she be the difference for the Los Angeles Sparks? Can they help them? This is a team today, they sit at 11-14, 10 games behind first place, but they're on the outside looking in of that playoff line. Is this what the Sparks need? Is she the spark? No pun intended.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if Brink returning will maybe open some things up a bit more for Kelsey Plum and kind of take some pressure off of her. Kelsey Plum is still, she's fourth in the W this year in scoring, 20.1 points per game. She's scoring a lot. It hasn't been all that at like a super efficient rate. But maybe with Brink back in the lineup, drawing some attention into the paint, drawing some attention into the rim. Maybe that opens some things up for Kelsey Plum, not only from the 3-point line, but maybe for some lanes driving to the basket as well.
No, I totally agree. We will see. It'll be determined how much she can play, what that minutes looks like. I'm sure she'll be on limitations, but that is a bright spot on what has been a large injury report in the W as of late. And a reminder to all the fans and everybody out there, August 7th is the trade deadline. So there will be a ton of movement here within the next week or so. All right, let's switch gears, Mitchell. Let's talk about the ACC. I kind of want to start maybe 60,000 foot, a comparison of last year to where we are this year at the end of July, coming out of football media days. Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, I think he's drawn a lot of praise in the fact that the one word I've heard is sort of stabilized, that the ACC, quote unquote, has stabilized. No lawsuits. We figured some things out. Does this league sit better today than it did, let's say, a year ago at this time?
I think you can look at it two different ways on sort of the conference realignment front. A year ago at this time, they were still entrenched in those lawsuits with Clemson and Florida State. And I feel like most legal experts at the time were kind of saying that Clemson and Florida State really didn't have any ground to stand on in terms of like trying to break that grant of rights that we were told was kind of ironclad through 2036 and was basically going to keep this conference together through then. But it, at some point, one way or another, the ACC reached a settlement with Clemson and Florida State. Those lawsuits are over. And now there is sort of like an expiration date, essentially, a little bit on the ACC in terms of when teams can leave this league. There was a report last week that apparently UNC's chancellor, Lee Roberts, sort of assisted in this settlement between Clemson and Florida State, which I found to be kind of the most interesting thing. There was a lot of things written about UNC last week, partly because of the Bill Belichick of it all, and partly, there's people speculating about, them going to the SEC. But I found that to be pretty interesting because, during all of this conference realignment stuff that's been going on, while Clemson and Florida State were the schools that were willing to sort of make a mess and make all the noise and take the ACC to court and all that stuff, UNC was kind of sitting back and they were watching everything. And they were paying very close attention. And there's been reports out there, if you Google Carolina Blue Matter, I think The Athletic and the News and Observer and Raleigh have written about this. The ACC had lawyers and people look at how to, UNC rather, had lawyers and people look at how to get out of the ACC. I think there's a lot of folks in the national media who have rightly said, and I think this is true as well, that whenever the time for the next round of big conference realignment comes, and when these teams are a bit more free from the ACC, part of this settlement was that I believe it's in 2030 or 2031, the exit fee drops dramatically.
Right.
So that is kind of the time frame that we're looking at in which teams might be on the move again. But when that time comes around, UNC is probably the most valuable ACC property in terms of the eyes of the SEC and the Big Ten, more than Clemson and more than Florida State, because it's not just about how good are you at football. A lot of it is also about, North Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country. And the SEC and the Big Ten don't have presences here.
Yeah.
The SEC already has a presence in South Carolina and in Florida. So in terms of just like TV eyeballs, viewership, brand power is a big one. I mean, no school in the country has the same association with Michael Jordan and the Jordan brand that North Carolina does.
It's a no-brainer from that standpoint, and the fact of it is recognizable beyond compare.
Yeah. So, in the short term, yes, the ACC is in good shape. They have stability for the next basically 5 years, and then we'll see what happens. But the other thing is, like, we don't really know what college athletics are going to look like in 5 years. I
Amen.
mean, we're in
so
a very
true.
different place in time than we were in 2020.
Yeah.
We have NIL and we have the portal and we have house settlement, and like all those things could look different in 2030.
Yeah.
I think that is what the ACC was kind of going for. Like, all right, let's get out of these lawsuits and stuff. Let's have some stability for the next 5 years. I've heard a couple people say, if you look at kind of like how things are structured right now in the ACC, it is really a eat what you kill conference in the sense that the ACC is going to give more money to schools, and women's basketball is included in this. They have this success initiative, essentially. So,
yes.
The more that you win in the postseason in football, men's basketball, and women's basketball, the more revenue you get from, the TV rights contract and everything else. It's not an even split anymore. So, the schools that are doing good in those parts, they're going to get more. Also, in the football part of it, the more viewership that you draw throughout the regular season, you'll get more money that way as well. So I think that the ACC and I think Jim Phillips feels like they're at a good spot right now, and they're in a good spot where, like, between now and 2030, as things change, as they always do in college sports, it seems like lately, they're in a good position to kind of pivot and, whatever it is. And, their television contract with ESPN, like, let's say we get to 2030, 2031, and Florida State, Clemson, and UNC all leave. Well, you added Cal, Stanford, and SMU to keep that television contract intact in terms of the numbers. I think there's a clause where ESPN can renegotiate if it goes below 15 teams. So I think, Jim Phillips, he said a lot during his press conference this past week. I think he preached, like you said, kind of patience and stability, and sort of like, let's not rush to make decisions on, a number of things. He talked about not only the college football playoff expansion, but also expansion of the NCAA tournament as well, which has been a hot topic. So that was kind of what he was preaching. We're kind of at a piece in our time right now, and let's kind of keep it that way. And let's, everybody's happy for the time being that we change some things around. And let's just, not rush anything else.
No, that makes total sense. All right. When we come back, Mitchell caught up with some of the ACC coaches recently as well in women's basketball. What are their topics? What are things that are barreling towards them as they think about this upcoming season? Some of it is peace. Some of it is maybe some stability too. Well, it's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavors to your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick energy shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with your friends, there's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need an extra boost to stay sharp and stay engaged. It has been maybe 12 years since I played my last 9 holes of golf. Did it 2 weekends ago. It wasn't fantastic, but there's always that one shot that keeps us going back. That's me. Whether it's a shot of energy or a shot on the golf course with my 3-wood, I'm going back. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go to without chasing it down. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use the promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription offers. Whether you're meeting up with your friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrich. Thank you for joining us on Locked On Women's Basketball. Mitchell Northam of SB Nation is with me today. All right, Mitchell, peace, stability, all things. We're kind of hanging out in the ACC. Football is leading the pack right now because it's, August. That's coming down the barrel. But the basketball season is right around the corner too. And I know you had a chance to catch up with with a few ACC women's basketball coaches over the past month or so. As you talk with these coaches and they are managing things like revenue sharing, house settlement, NIL, what's the general, maybe vibe around these coaches and the ACC as they look at their league and think about what they need to be uber competitive within the top programs in the country?
I think we're in the era of the general manager.
Okay.
That seems to be not everybody is hiring a general manager. Wes Moore has not hired a general manager, even though he admitted that he is not a very good general manager himself.
Okay.
He talked about kind of the sense that he kind of sees like sort of the structure and like the point of a general manager, but kind of like if he were to hire one, still at the end of the day, when it comes to the big recruiting and the big roster decisions, the basketball coach is still making all those decisions,
Right.
the head coach. It's not like the NFL where, the general manager puts the roster together and you go coach it. It's still, in college basketball, maybe that's the one true dictatorship left in America is the college basketball coach who gets to make all the decisions. But yeah, I talked to Megan Duffy, who, she talked about, she hired a general manager this season, and Virginia Tech was a team that, got left on the bubble last year, just outside of making the tournament, first four out in her first season there. And she basically just said, with all the changes to NIL and the house settlement and everything else, she wants to focus on coaching and recruiting. But she needs somebody else to kind of tell her what's going on with all that other stuff with, what are the rules with house and what are the rules with rev share and how much money do we have to sort of play with here in terms of that stuff. And, kind of back to the NC State situation of it all, like, Wes Moore, he said, I'm not a very good general manager. We kind of saw that play out a little bit, in the spring where they took a couple big swings at some transfer targets and didn't get them. They wanted Wanatanda from Texas. They wanted Kara Dunn from Georgia Tech. They wanted Ali Kubik. There are a couple other players who are escaping me off the top of my head. Fat Montajana, who went from St. Peter's to Texas A&M. So, there were these players out there that they wanted and then couldn't get. And then sort of Camille Pierre kind of falls into their lap in the last month. And Wes Moore.
So talk to me about that, because I think, like you said, I think all of these coaches in their own right, they're managing, they're trying to figure it out. You're trying to fill holes. You not only got to re-recruit your own roster, you got to try to keep people. We know they're going to go, like, the movement is inevitable. It's the matter of how well you manage it. Some of these coaches, as you said, like a Megan Duffy, et cetera, they're going to say, I got somebody else now to help me kind of deal with all of the back of house stuff. I got to be able to take care of my team on the floor. If you're Wes Moore and you were still trying to fill some holes, and now all of a sudden one of the best players out of the SEC just magically shows up in Raleigh, how does that work?
It's definitely a loophole that I think the NCAA is going to have to look at, or we're going to have this happen a lot more often. I mean, we also just saw it in football. We saw the BYU quarterback basically get kicked out of school for an honor code violation, and now he's at Tulane. And basically, what I was told in this situation was, when Camille Pierre was, it was reported that she was dismissed from the team, although Vanderbilt didn't frame it that way publicly. When that happened, basically she was in a situation where, the transfer portal was not open. So what she had to do essentially was, and coaches were also not allowed to contact her. So there was a party that was sort of an intermediary. This is what I was told, I don't know if this person was an agent or a family member, but someone that, could kind of facilitate the communication through a back channel. And Camille Pierre had a number of programs kind of reach out through that way. Ultimately, for her to be on a roster for next season, she had to apply and be admitted into a new school. Which I was told once she got to kind of that point of sort of narrowing down and figuring out, okay, how is this going to work? What schools can I actually get into and whatever. I think she applied to more than a few, but she got into NC State and Michigan State.
Okay.
And then from there, made the decision to come to NC State. And now once she enrolled, then she could talk to coaches and things of that nature. And I guess technically will be considered a walk-on of sorts. But, with the rev share now, whereas, I think NC State, maybe because they didn't get any of those transfer targets that I talked about, this was a little bit of blessing in disguise. They had some money saved up that they didn't get to spend in terms of NIL and rev share, that they were now able to, once they could kind of have those conversations with Camille Pierre, say, hey, we have X amount of dollars for you. And so, it works out for NC State, because I think that there were a lot of people going into the next season like, okay, well, Zoe Brooks, she's a really good player. Like, she'll step up and fill the Isaiah James spot. And, you have Tilda Trigger, and she's a good kind of rising player, 6'6", can stretch the floor a little bit as well. But, you also lost Madison Hayes and Sanaya Rivers. And so what are we going to do there? And that 4 spot that Madison Hayes played, kind of that hybrid role. I mean, Camille Pierre is a perfect fit for that. I mean, she, like Wes Moore said, was a walking double-double last year in the SEC. I mean, basically averaged 20 and 10 on a tournament team, playing alongside, a ball-dominant guard in Michaela Blakes.
Yes.
It's an excellent pickup for NC State. Even though it happened in a really weird way and all that stuff. But I think it kind of puts them back into the conversation of contending for the ACC title.
No, I would absolutely agree with that. And even though Wes Moore might not think he's a great general manager, somehow or another, they were able to get this figured out. And that's just instant impact from the get-go for a player like that to join their roster. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah.
All right. When we come back, more with Mitchell, a new television deal out in the Big East, something about NCAA selection criteria addition of note. Also, a lot of rumblings about tournament expansion. We're going to talk about all of it in just a second. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. Missy Heydrich and Mitchell Northam of SB Nation's here with me today. All right, we've run the gamut, my friend, from stability and patience in the ACC, coaches trying to figure out how to manage this craziness. But there was news out of the Big East this summer, which I thought really was one of those things that kind of puts them in a position, because we know this is a league without football in the sense that we all think of it in the Power Fours. And we all talk about Power Four. I know the Big East gets a little bit offended that they're not included. So sometimes in basketball, we have to talk Power Five, and that includes the Big East now, etc. But I think this, right? I'm not good at it. I'm terrible at it. I will say I never think of it, and that's no offense to Big East people, I swear.
I would just say to the Big East people, if you want to be a part of the Power Five in women's college basketball, you got to put more teams in the NCAA tournament.
Thank you. Then it will be easier for it to just come off the tongue to say Power Five, but that doesn't happen. So we're still Power Four plus the Big East. But this new television deal, I think, is a bonus for them, and it's a really good opportunity maybe to showcase more. But as you said, you're still going to have to elevate the league. And I don't know if the Big East, if they're quite there yet. What do you think? What was the take as they thought about this new deal and how it impacts women's basketball?
Yeah, I was texting with an assistant coach in the Big East actually before this was publicly announced, and they were very, very happy about this and happy to be off of Flow Sports and on the ESPN. I mean, you're on a more accessible platform, even
Yes.
if it is ESPN Plus. A lot of people have ESPN Plus. You know, and you're going to have some games on the linear ESPN. You know, it's just better for overall exposure, for your brand, for all that stuff, for recruiting, for everything, to be on something that is more accessible than Flow Sports. And so, yeah, I think this is a very good move for the Big East. I think you're probably going to see, you know, if UConn is going to be really, really good again this year, which I think they're going to be because they have Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd back and got some good transfers. You're probably going to see them flex some games, I would imagine, off of ESPN Plus and onto that, you know, linear ESPN, you know, whether it's 2 or U or News or whatever, or the mothership. I imagine that's going to happen a couple times. You know, UConn draws well in terms of TV viewership numbers. So, yeah, I think overall it's a really good move for the Big East. It's a good move for them that they're on just a bigger platform.
Well, and you said when you flex those games, now other programs get more exposure, you know, whether it's an actual good game on the floor to be determined. We just need to see the elevation of other programs within that league to be able to contend with UConn. But it doesn't matter. The exposure is absolutely the best thing that they could ask for. My next question to you, you wrote about this, is a new concept as it relates to selection criteria within the NCAA tournament and what the selection committee will be looking at. And it's something called WAB, W-A-B. Tell me what WAB is and give everybody an insight as to how this can kind of change maybe the conversations that go on in that room come Selection Sunday.
Yeah, so WAB or WOB or wins against bubble is essentially this metric that it's going to reward teams for playing against other good teams. Essentially, it comes, you know, it takes like what your average bubble team would be, right? So, and it compares them to, you know, let's say we're taking, you know, the average bubble team and we're playing them against NC State's schedule, and it comes up with, all right, well, the average bubble team would win 18 games with this schedule. Well, NC State, if they mess around and they win 28 games on that schedule, then they have a WAB of plus 10. And that's a really good rating. So that's kind of what it does is, you know, it's the amount of wins you have minus the amount of wins an average bubble team would expect to have versus your schedule. So, yeah, in short, it is going to reward teams for playing against and beating other good teams. And so, yeah, I
like because I think that's the challenge, right? Because we get tired of watching people just play average non-con games, or if you've got a team that's, you know, at the bottom of your league that someone's, you know, you're kind of feeling like Nets are being punished or what have you. Well, sometimes if you're a Virginia Tech a year ago, something like this could have been what pushed them over the bubble, right?
Yeah. Yep. And I talked to Jackie Carson about this when I was in Charlotte last week. She's the senior associate commissioner for women's basketball for the ACC. She's a huge fan of this. She talked to a lot of the selection committee members this offseason just about like, hey, so, you know, Virginia Tech didn't make it. That's fine. That's done with or whatever. But what do we need to do? Like, how do we need to schedule better? You know, what can we do here to kind of fix this? And she was very happy that this new formula is going to be implemented. I mean, if you look at like kind of the resumes of like teams that were on the bubble last year, so Washington, Columbia, Princeton, and Nebraska, they all made the tournament. But Virginia Tech had either the same or more wins than those teams against teams who were ranked top 100 in the net. They had more than Washington and Columbia, and the same number as Princeton and Nebraska. And all 4 of those teams received at-large bids, and Virginia Tech didn't. Now, you know, wins against the top 100 is not the same metric as WAB, but it again, like it's going to reward you for playing an ACC schedule and, like Virginia Tech did, beating 3 teams that made the NCAA tournament. So I think had this metric maybe been in last year, it might have given Virginia Tech the edge over some of those other bubble teams.
My last question to you real quick, as you talk to these coaches and kind of the conversations, the vibe around ACC Media Days as everybody gathers in the same place, are we for tournament expansion, or are we please leave it alone? Life is good where we are.
Yeah, so this wasn't actually even really on my mind as I went into ACC Media Days, but during his big press conference that he gives every year, kind of the state of the conference thing, Jim Phillips said, our men's coaches are more in favor of expansion, our women's coaches are more against expansion. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. And I think when you boil it down, I mean, the reason maybe why is that the ACC on the men's side has had some trouble getting a lot of teams into the NCAA tournament over the past couple of years. And on the women's side, that hasn't been a problem. They've been at, 8, 9, 10 teams for the past several years now, and have had teams go deep into the tournament and make the Final Four and all that good stuff. But yeah, I followed up with Jackie Carson about that, and she reiterated that. She said pretty much the majority of the coaches said we don't want expansion. I was like, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I asked Wes Moore about it. We got some time with him last week. I'm going to ask Courtney Banghart as well. We're going to get some time with her later this week. And Wes kind of seemed to, he seemed like he hadn't put really a ton of thought into it and was really willing to go with whatever they sort of decided. He seemed to be open to the idea of 72. I think he was a little conflicted, with just the sense of like, all right, well, if we do this, what does the bracket look like? And Wes said he never really got an answer on that. Are you just adding more first 4 games? And if that's the case, Jackie Carson was a little bit concerned, about that because it's different on the men and women's side. On the women's side, we have these first 4 games on campuses. And these first 4 games, for the most part, are not all that well attended, because you're kind of taking teams from far-flung places and sort of putting them, in places that are not close to their campus. And a lot of times they're mid-major teams with not big fan bases and all that good stuff. So she was a little bit, I think, concerned about that. Now, if you expand to 72 and, maybe they finally say on the women's side, you know what, we're going to do the first 4 at a neutral site, like they do on the men's side. We're going to play these games in, I don't know, Norfolk or something like that. And then we'll disperse them to their campus sites after that, which is essentially what they do on the men's side. They go to Dayton and then they go to those regionals. So, she said, like, if something happened, maybe our coaches might be, maybe that might change their thinking a little bit. But I think right now, she said trying to play and travel as a first 4 team is kind of a nightmare. And again, like, those games aren't really well attended. I think the other hurdle for expansion on the women's side is there was that report at Front Office Sports that says that, even if they expand the tournament, ESPN is not going to pay more media rights, and they're not changing that contract for the rev share payout. So it's like, all right, well, what are we really adding more games for then?
You're watering down the ultimate end product, and for the people for the 68, the field of 68 that gets in, you're differentiating what you've done before.
Yeah, it's like, I understand money is a motivator, and usually that is what is behind the NCAA's motivations. But if you're not getting money, then what is the motivator, right? Like, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me as to why people would want this if there's no more incentive coming from the television deal aspect of it all.
100% agree. And I think that's going to have to be the question that everybody answers going forward. Can this work? And is it going to be a better financial situation for the value of what you're doing? We throw that word around all the time. Everything's about value. Well, then you got to kind of put your money where your mouth is if you think that value is there.
Absolutely.
Mitchell Northam, you are the best, my friend. Where does everybody find you on a daily basis?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Primetime Mitch. I'm on Bluesky too, Instagram, all that good stuff. I'm writing over at SB Nation's Breakaway. I'll have some stuff there this week, including I had a one-on-one with Jim Phillips that I'm going to write up and have that up on the site this week. And I co-host the Women's Basketball Podcast with Mia O'Brien, and you can get that wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much. And you didn't answer I got one more question. Best dressed coach at ACC Media Days.
Oh, that's a good question. It was not Bill Belichick. Manny Diaz always looks pretty sharp.
Okay. We'll give it to him.
Put together, sharp suit. He's Carson Beck, if I had to pick a player, Miami's quarterback, he had on like this green, Miami suit that looked good. Justin Jolie, NC State tight end, he had a red suit that he fit pretty well. So a couple sharp dressed guys there.
There we go. I like it. I love it. Well, I appreciate you so much, my friend. Thank you. Everybody come follow us here at Locked On Women's Basketball. Also go see us, www.thenexthoops.com. All of my colleagues have you covered with everything there. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. For your second, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiation, rumors, everything you need to know. The most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Happy Monday, everybody. Have a great week. August is right around the corner.